The relationship between Haas Formula 1 teammates Nikita Mazepin and Mick Schumacher was already fractious, to put it generously. But over the past 2 race weekends in the Netherlands and Italy, the size of the growing rift between the pair was made abundantly clear. The big flashpoints were at Zandvoort, where after qualifying, Mazepin accused Schumacher of deliberately spoiling his final lap in Q1 to ensure that he outqualified him. Then, after the race, Schumacher demanded consequences for Mazepin for what he saw as dangerous driving as the pair battled for 17th place at the end of the first lap. The duo were frosty about each other, to say the least, at Monza, and twice made contact on track as the rift showed no signs of closing up. It's very obvious that, on top of enduring a long and painful season at the back of the grid in an underdeveloped car, the Haas team has the added problem of 2 drivers who all too often appear to be on a collision course. It's quite the headache for team principal Günther Steiner. Let us know in the comments what you make of the intra-team dynamic at Haas and who you think is to blame for the situation. Zandvoort had the potential to be a turning point for Mazepin. Despite significantly more F1 car mileage than Schumacher heading into the season, thanks to his running in the past with Force India and Mercedes, Mazepin had struggled for pace. But Mazepin was given a brand new chassis for the first event after the summer break at Spa. This followed complaints that the weight of his patched up chassis, which was one of 2 carried over from 2020 and therefore had suffered wear and tear and resulting repairs, was costing him lap time. While the team has downplayed the impact of this, especially as Schumacher is also in a carried over chassis, Mazepin is adamant it has played a part in his growing confidence and genuine pace improvement. At Zandvoort, he was faster than Schumacher in 2 out of 3 practice sessions and by 7,000th of a second on the first runs in Q1. They both improved their times on the second runs, with Schumacher almost 0.5 quicker. But the flashpoint happened on the final runs when Schumacher overtook Mazepin on his outlap. After the session, Mazepin accused Schumacher of ruining his final lap deliberately in TV interviews. His anger was understandable, given the team had not warned him while on his outlap that Schumacher had actually asked for permission to overtake over the radio and had been given the go-ahead. What was more unexpected was Mazepin doubled down on his position later that afternoon, after the team explained the situation was not Schumacher's fault. Haas attempted to send Mazepin and Schumacher out with a gap between them, only for traffic at the pit exit caused by rivals making gaps to result in the pair leaving the pits together. Schumacher required a faster outlap than Mazepin to build the necessary tyre temperature, so asked race engineer Gary Gannon if he was allowed to overtake. Gannon told him he could pass Mazepin, provided he did it early in the lap, suggesting he should do it coming out of turn 3. Schumacher duly did so, but Mazepin was not informed either before the fact or later in his outlap. Mazepin later explained it had been made clear to him in the second race of the season at Imola that Haas drivers don't pass each other in such circumstances. He also claimed Schumacher violated this agreement previously during the Austrian Grand Prix weekend. At the end of the lap, both got caught up in the backing up traffic as Sebastian Vettel approached on a hot lap. Mazepin was aware of the Aston Martin's rapid approach, but Schumacher wasn't. As a result, Mazepin attempted to pass Schumacher in turn 13 with the pair side by side, forcing Vettel to back off. Neither Haas driver improved their time, Vettel's lap was ruined, and the Haas pair was summoned to the stewards. No action was taken, with Mazepin describing Vettel as a gentleman for his honest appraisal that the situation was the consequence of multiple cars backing up rather than one individual. Mazepin had a right to be unhappy with the team for its poor communication, yet he had Schumacher firmly in his sights even once he knew the facts. He doubled down on his position that Schumacher was going against team rules, suggesting he was being cheeky. As for Schumacher, he was diplomatic but could not hide his frustration with Mazepin. In the race, the pair crossed swords on track again. Schumacher held the advantage at the start, but Mazepin attacked and pulled off an impressive overtaking manoeuvre through turns 7 and 8. Even if Schumacher might have felt Mazepin was taking too big a risk, this was a legitimate and very well executed pass, so no problem there. What happened at the end of the lap was less commendable. Schumacher got a run on Mazepin through the banking of turn 14 and pulled to the right of him to overtake. Mazepin spotted him and jinked right to cover him. This forced Schumacher towards the pit entry, and when he edged back to the left to avoid crossing the dotted line separating the track and pit entry, his front wing was damaged by Mazepin's front right wheel. This forced an early pit stop and compromised Schumacher's race, with Mazepin later retiring with a hydraulic problem. This time, it was Schumacher who hit out, and understandably so. Mazepin's move on the straight is of the type that drivers generally dislike, given the risk of causing a huge accident. While race stewards failed even to note the incident, it was an unsafe move of the type Mazepin became notorious for in his pre-F1 days. And Mazepin himself said at Monza that he will continue to deploy such tactics given the stewards effectively approved it by taking no action. The controversy carried over into Monza, where it's understood Schumacher and Mazepin were barely on speaking terms. In the build-up to the weekend, Schumacher played the diplomatic role and declined to comment on what happened at Zandvoort. And while Mazepin did the same, he did claim "I'm not in the bad books," and also suggested Schumacher should have lifted at Zandvoort rather than moving back to the left to avoid the pit lane marker bollard. Inevitably, there were flashpoints on track at Monza. On the first lap of the race, Mazepin defended approaching the second Lesmo before moving left to take the conventional line into the corner. In doing so, he clipped Schumacher. Later in the race, Mazepin was on the inside approaching the second chicane, but with no real overlap, and tipped Schumacher into a spin, earning a 5-second penalty. Despite his apology, that latest collision will have done nothing for intra-team relations at Haas. The back-to-back Zandvoort-Monza weekends are far from the first time that controversy has erupted at Haas. During free practice in Portugal, Mazepin was unhappy when Schumacher came flying past him, having not been warned by the team that he was doing back-to-back push laps. In Monaco, Schumacher suffered a temporary engine problem and dropped behind Mazepin, but was frustrated he was not allowed to attempt to retake the position later in the race. With the relationship between the pair already showing signs of being strained, the first big flashpoint was on the final lap of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. As Schumacher attempted to pass, Mazepin moved over to block him late at high speed. Although Schumacher completed the move, he was furious, saying over the radio, "Does he want to kill us?" While there were talks with the team that apparently calmed the situation, when asked about it 2 weeks later, Schumacher claimed Mazepin apologised, while Mazepin suggested there was nothing really to apologise for. Schumacher also suggested there would be harsher consequences if the move was repeated, which perhaps explains his anger at Zandvoort. The stewards did not investigate the incident at Baku either, meaning Mazepin can legitimately argue his defensive moves were perfectly legal, but that doesn't make them right. In the next race at Paul Ricard, Schumacher felt Mazepin forced him off the track at turn 3 at the first lap of the race. 3 races later, Mazepin misjudged his braking into Village at Silverstone during the sprint and spun after making contact with Schumacher. In the British Grand Prix itself the next day, Schumacher hinted that Mazepin should not have attacked him after their pit stops when they were meant to be avoiding overstressing the tyres. This followed Mazepin pulling off a superb pass through club. It's clear that events at Zandvoort and Monza were just the latest in a long line of incidents between the pair that explains their fractious relationship. The growing rift between Schumacher and Mazepin won't go away, but the man charged with trying to keep a lid on the rivalry is team principal Günther Steiner. He's phlegmatic about the situation, but you have to wonder if he's putting a brave face on the situation, given it has already created enough flashpoints to fill a whole season of the Netflix Drive to Survive series. But it is an unusual situation, given there have only been 7 prior instances of a team heading into a season with an all-rookie lineup in the past 40 years. Steiner has certainly tried to get things under control, and there were talks both after the Dutch Grand Prix and once the team got to Monza, but there are limits to his power. If Mazepin in particular, fueled by a combination of the power he holds, thanks to being the source of the backing from title sponsor Uralkali, and his own sense of entitlement, doesn't want to de-escalate the situation, then this will happen again. And despite Schumacher returning to the diplomatic high ground at Monza, it's clear he's not happy. It's also a situation that will likely continue next year. While Haas has not officially confirmed its driver lineup for 2022, Schumacher is expected to continue alongside Mazepin. This is despite some behind-the-scenes lobbying in an attempt to move the Ferrari contracted driver across to fellow customer team Alfa Romeo. It does appear Mazepin's determination, or should that be desperation, to beat Schumacher on track has clouded his judgment in terms of how he attacked him verbally at Zandvoort in particular. While it does take 2 to tango, so Schumacher has played his part, and Mazepin did have a legitimate grievance during Dutch Grand Prix qualifying, it does seem Mazepin has a majority stake in creating the fractious relationship, despite his post-Monza contrition. Whatever happens, it seems unlikely that the problem is going to vanish, no matter how much Steiner might hope that Zandvoort and Monza will be the nadir. so expect more flashpoints between these two drivers, which could become more damaging if the team is able to re-emerge as a point-scoring force in 2022. What is certain is that the rift between Schumacher and Mazepin is only making a tough season for everyone at Haas even harder. Let us know in the comments who you think is to blame for the problems at Haas and what you would do in Günther Steiner's shoes. And if you enjoyed this look at F1's most acrimonious teammate partnership, make sure you like and subscribe.